Hello, still becoming community, and welcome to the recap, a weekly show that I kind of just let everyone know how it's been going for the week, in terms of just all this distractions or mental buildups. It's not a short weekly recap that's emotional or dramatic. Just an honest look at how for this episode my marathon went and what to take from it. The purpose of this show is really learning to move forward when things don't go well, or at least perceived don't go well. I feel this week kind of going into it, my training block was pretty good. It was really relaxed, a good taper. Had some struggles mentally, when it came to thinking about, all right, there's not much left. Am I going to do I have enough? Yes, I do. I do. I had to keep reminding myself that. The mileage for the week was really just it's small. It wasn't going to be a whole lot to do when you have a marathon coming, and I knew that going in. It's just there was a little bit of it that was like, can we just get there? Kind of that rush, and then a little bit of anxiety with travel. Kind of that stress of am I going to make it? In fact, I almost missed my airplane transferring. So from, Portland to San Francisco, and then from San Francisco to Santa Barbara. That was kind of the struggle I had to run in the airport. That was something I had to deal with, and on Thursday coming into it, and kind of take a couple steps back on Wednesday when I was supposed to do a workout. It was questionable. The weather up where I'm at in Portland, it just, it was a little questionable. It was really cold. Unfortunately, I thought, hey, I got to make a choice here. Do I sacrifice and potentially slip on ice, or run on the treadmill and just, try and get some leg turnover and, see what happens? And unfortunately, I struggled with that mentally. I really just did not want to be on the treadmill, and, kind of got a little frustrated, a little down about it. Yeah, well, I guess I wouldn't say too down. I kind of knew the purpose of that workout was just to get the legs turning over and see how things went. But I only got through about a half mile of it before I just was so like, I'm not doing this on the treadmill. And I gave myself a couple minute break, jumped back on, tried to finish, and just couldn't handle it. The pace on the treadmill, I just mentally was like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. And so, I tapped out, didn't even finish the workout. So I just had to move on from that, tell myself, hey, it's okay. This isn't going to make or break your race. And I knew it wasn't. And so, fast forward after travel, I got here, went running Thursday afternoon, and, Thursday and Friday, things just felt a little, kind of jostled in the hips, a little wonky. And, I had to convince myself, hey, these are just parts of travel and learning from, things that happen. And so, eventually moves on. Saturday, day before the race, amazing. It wasn't very much work, but I really felt good. My sleep started to get better after travel and getting there to the race. So I mean, that was really good. Those challenges when it comes to traveling. I mean, I could have said, well, I'm done. This is it. I'm not going to do well because, I'm so stressed. But, it was great to go along with it. I kept telling myself, just relax, internalize that. Just, you got to keep the body relaxed. Think of it, kind of soften the face, relax the jaw when things got a little tight and stressful. And, I carried that into the race. And, I mentioned over on my YouTube page, it's still becoming 26, a short recap after. And, I mentioned that, hey, I put down what I felt was comfortable in the pace. Again, soft face, relaxed jaw, kept everything relaxed. And unfortunately, things didn't work out the way I wanted them to. And I would say, I'm okay with that. Started to really fall off at mile 20, and it just was no going back. My legs cramped up. It just ended up becoming a story that you don't want to have happen to you, but it did. And, I think I can grow from that. I know I can. I just go back to the drawing board and say, hey, there's things that potentially we can look at and work on. I don't think when you have a bad result like this, it's easy to just quit, but that's not what this is about. This is about moving forward, even when something doesn't go right. And as I mentioned on my Instagram, I'm kind of, in a weird way, happy it didn't go well. I sometimes feel like we can learn things from the losses. We have a lot more than the wins. And when you're trying to still become, it's great to have those moments where you have success. But, it's sometimes more humbling when you don't end up getting the results you wanted and you just have to search and find a way to achieve it again. I will say this is not the end of me. This is not the end of what this means. Still becoming. It's that portion of life when things get quiet and you're too afraid to step into that, you know, that jump off point and say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to fail at it. But, I think at the end of the day, you can be proud you're still becoming, and, remember, you are the only one stopping you. And that's a true testament to, you know, all these things we have in life. I've raised kids, raised two soon to be teenagers, and got my family, wife, two dogs. To take away time from this, I couldn't thank them enough for my wife just manning the fort and letting me kind of go and explore this race and try to still become. But to you out there, know that, hey, falling, it's just a matter of getting back up and trying again and trying again. And even if we never achieve those goals that you set out, it takes a lot of guts to go and do it and to keep at it and keep at it. And there's definitely a lot of times you just want to throw in the towel, but hey, you got to still keep going. After all, you're still becoming. All right. Until next time, have a good week. Talk to you later. Bye.